Hi, this is Eric from Cafe Watercolor and welcome to another painting demo. This is a painting that I'm very excited to share with you. The full unedited demo is about an hour long and is available for my patrons, so if you're interested, definitely check out my Patreon page. All that being said, let's jump into it. This photo was taken at Ambleside Park at West Vancouver. So I went to Vancouver during the Thanksgiving weekend. It's a little bit of getaway. It's been such a long time since I was able to visit the neighbor country. I missed the place a lot, so I'm glad I was finally able to visit there again. We went to Ambleside Park at West Vancouver and it was a nice sunny day. And it was the only sunny day out of the 3 days that we were staying there. So we have this wonderful sunny sky with huge cloudscapes around us. And I was looking out into the water and I saw this huge cargo ship sailing towards us. And it's really far away. I actually took this photo with a 4x zoom lens. So I decided to paint this scenery because I really love the cloud and the scale that it brings with the cargo ship that's really far away, because cargo ship is huge, but comparing to the epic huge scale cloudscape in the background, it becomes a little bit small. So I really like that scale comparison between the nature and man-made structures. And it's been a while since I do a big cloudy sky, so I really want to paint this one. And I had a lot of fun painting this one as well. So the line drawing is relatively simple. All I really need to make sure is to have the right scale and placement of the scenes, which is the cargo ship and the buildings in the background. The composition becomes a very important thing in this painting because the shapes are mostly very small, while the focus of the painting will be the cargo ship because it's going to be the darkest element in the painting. I want to have a more open sky. That's why earlier you see me erase the drawing and I move the whole horizon down. That way you have more sky, so that will give me more space for big huge cloudscape in the background. So this is very similar to the 70-30 rules that I mentioned in one of the previous videos. So we start the first wash and naturally we start with the background, which is the cloudscape first. And I wet pretty much the whole painting, and to keep the moisture wetter I actually spray a little bit of water on it. And while I'm waiting for the paper to absorb the water and the moisture, I'm starting to mix the color for the sky. So the color of the sky is a mixture of cerulean blue and cobalt blue. Because the sky in this scenery is relatively close to the horizon, the blue is not going to be really that saturated because of the haze and the distance. So we don't need to mix a very heavy saturated sky. But it's important to have a good consistent intensity of your mixture, so when you are doing wet onto wet like what I'm doing right now, the color is going to stay and it's not going to fade off too much. So I use a big mop brush trying to get some big stroke on the top, especially because I want some nice soft wispy cloud that's in the background. And as I approach the bottom of those heavy cumulus cloud, I start to be a little bit more careful and try to preserve the silhouette of those clouds. And the paper is turning from moist to damp, so make sure you have enough paint in your mixture so that you have the right consistency, right intensity for the effect that you want to achieve right now, because I do want a little bit of softness because the cloud is puffy and soft, but you don't want to use a lot of the water right now because it's going to create cauliflower edges. And it's easier to said than done because you need to spend time to familiarize with the material, with the watercolor, and that takes a lot of practice. So I'm grabbing the blue from the sky, adding some alizarin crimson and other colors to make it just a little bit darker. And I start to add those volumes into the cumulus cloud in the background. And as you can see from the zoom in view, each stroke that I paint, the color is still going to spread out just a little bit but it's just enough to feel the softness, yet it retains its shape. This part of the painting is the most fun, but also the most difficult and nerve-wracking. Because if you get the mixture wrong, if you get the wetness wrong, you might not have the effect that you want and you might ruin the wash. So this is almost a risk assessment, because with watercolor you never really know what exactly it's going to look like, so you need to make the decision on the fly. Try to predict the outcome when you are putting down individual brushstroke, especially during wet onto wet. So I did took some risk here when I'm painting the cloud, when I'm adding some dark, and I'm happy to say that the risk I took is well rewarded. And before the wash is completely dry, you can use a clean, damp brush and try to lift some of the dark that you painted. So that's how I get some of the light back. And now I feel like the cloud is at a good stage, so I decided not to touch it anymore and let it be. And I continue to wash down and start to paint the water. Now if you use a big brush and paint on a cold press or rough paper, when you do some quick stroke, it's going to reveal some of the paper texture, and that brings out this sparkling effect for the water surface. And those are magical. Don't fill it all in. Really utilize this texture and make this wonderful water surface. And after I complete the wash, come back with a smaller brush and more intense dark paint, and I paint some wet onto wet, get some nice soft ripple effect in the water. That makes the water feel like it's moving and it is not a completely flat surface. So we got some sparkling moving water. So you might notice that where I left the sparkling areas on the water is actually hinting the reflection of the cloud in the background. For large-scale seawater, especially the ones in the distance, the reflections are usually not that clear, but you can still hint a little bit of that. And now I'm starting to paint the background buildings, the ones that are way into the distance. And as you can see, the wash is not completely dry yet, so I still get a little bit of the softness, which is great. I don't want it to be completely clear and sharp edges. I use a smaller brush just so that I can have a little bit more control, but that doesn't mean I start to paint a lot of details. I leave out some highlights to suggest the buildings in the backgrounds. And I add a little bit of warm and cool colors just to make that background looks a little bit more interesting. And I connect that shape to the cargo ship. And this is an important part. Even though some part of the cargo ship is white, because of the white paint exterior, doesn't mean that you leave that white in your painting. I leave out a little bit of highlight because of the sun, but the area that is not lit by the sun is actually not pure white because of the value. So make sure you give it some value. One thing I always tell my student is to observe, really observe the source image, the source material that you're painting from. Don't paint with your perception of what things look like. So in this case, even if you know the local color of the object is white, doesn't mean that you paint it white, because if you really observe the image, it is not white, it has its value. So I think as an artist, it is very important you spend more time looking, spend more time observing and appreciate what you see in the nature in the real world. We want to do nature justice. We want to celebrate and appreciate what we see in the real world, but we cannot do that unless we first appreciate them ourselves, unless we first give the nature enough attention, give the nature enough observation ourselves. So doing some wet onto wet, starting to make things a little bit darker so they start to come forward. And now adding the secondary value, which is the middle value, and you start to see the depth of the painting. But if you really look at it, I didn't really do all that much. It's just different values and shapes. And that's what I like about this painting this subject so much, because the shapes are quite simple and actually pretty small. But it is a very powerful image to me because, again, the contrast between nature and man-made and the vastness of the scenery. Adding some more warmer colors to the buildings that add the richness and the varieties within this simple shape. And again, add some incidental highlights to suggest buildings and structures in those distant buildings. And there's actually another cargo ship there, so we just want to give it a little bit of highlight. So the only thing that pops out is that little highlight of the cargo ship in the background, but everything else is connected. And again, connection of shapes is probably one of the most important things when you are painting watercolor. We give the viewer just enough information, well-painted visual information for them to look at them and able to identify what they're looking at. And I think what's great about a loose painting like this one is that we don't give out everything. We let the viewer to experience the excitement and the reward when they get the visual clues from your painting and able to figure out what they're looking at. And that in the end actually make them feel more engaged with your painting. Now I'm adding the dark to the cargo ship. And as soon as I put those dark values in it, the cargo ship are separated from the background. The ship hull is black, the logo color is black, and we're painting the dark side of it, so you can safely make it really dark. I actually add some neutral tint to it. And by adding the contrast, we can feel the structure of the ship as well. Adding some details, windows, antennas, whatever. And now we can see the ship is nicely sitting on top of the water surface and is popping in front of the background. You can really feel the depths of this painting now. And now I am going to paint the bridge. That is Lionsgate Bridge. That's a bridge connect between the downtown Vancouver and the North Vancouver. And I am trying to freehand this. So as you can tell, it's probably a little bit of a challenge to me. So I try to create some dot that I can connect it. Now, while I'm not going to dab my way through, I am not going to try to do it in one single stroke. It's a little bit difficult. So I'll build that bridge in a few different strokes. Try really hard to have a steady hand. So I try to lock my wrist and use my elbow to move my whole wrist to do this motion. There are some artists can do it very well, especially if they have like an industrial designer background, because they can do straight lines and curved lines very well. I am not one of them, so I try to have a little bit more practice on that. So now I'm trying to add just a little bit more texture on the water, hint some reflections using the side of my brush, add a tiny little bit of values and some more ripples. But I want to make sure myself not to overdo it, because if you give too much texture on the water surface, that might actually break the scale. And here is the finished painting. Again, I very enjoy this painting and I love how it turned out. I'm quite proud of it myself. If you're interested in the full unedited demo, be sure to check out my Patreon page. If you're new here, consider like this video and subscribe to my channel for more content like this one. Also visit my website at cafewatercolor.com for my free PDF guide and my watercolor essential course. All that being said, thank you so much for watching. I'm Eric from Cafe Watercolor. Hope you have a wonderful day wherever you are. I will see you guys next time.